of the United States
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, a nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Gotta love the reverb. We do not have any public comment today, so we'll move on to 4, approval of the April 11th, 2023 Public Safety Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion? Motion made, and a second, Motion made and second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carried. We'll move on to 5A, discussion regarding 2024 budget, annual budget and policy recommendations from the committee. 1, review of mandatory discretionary program document, and I'll turn it over to Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair Boots. We've been meeting with all of the standing committees to go over the process that we're embarking on for the development of this year's budget, and it's a change to previous approaches, and it's meant to engage the committees early in the process and helping us have a discussion about what programs should the county deliver, at what level should we deliver those services, who's our target populations, and how should we pay for those through rates and fees and other things. So what we're doing is meeting with the committees and going over a number of documents, but the administrator and administration have prepared the mandated service review, which goes through most of the programs, and not in excruciating detail, but at a high enough level to show you whether they're mandated and not. And there are differences in mandates. For instance, we're required to have a sheriff's department, but we're not required to have a bomb team. We're not required to have a SWAT team. We're not required to have other things, but they're necessary in order to carry out the duties of that department. And I think we're looking for input into, what programs should be continued. Are there new programs that should be under review? And toward that end, I would point out that previously, in a different capacity, I was here as the previous chair of the Wausau Policing Task Force with the sheriff and others to talk about the expansion of the crisis assessment response team that matches mental health officers with officers in the field, or professionals with officers in the field, to try to deal with the needs, expanding that program into evenings and weekends, and then also the importance of crisis case management for people in crisis as a way of keeping people out of the jail. But what we're looking for is really committees to look at those mandated services, look at the historic budget that you have. You have the 5-year history for the Sheriff's Department and the jail and in juvenile detention programs, and then look at the rates and the fees and provide input. The ultimate arbitrator of all issues will be the county board when we meet to adopt the 2024 budget. But there's a lot of input that goes into it, and we will be, as a Human Resource Finance and Property Committee, taking to the county board later this month some budget priorities, and we talked about those at the educational meeting, but where will we be on healthcare, on compensation, on new positions, on operating expenses, and how will we approach reserves and structural deficits and other items. But you'll have an opportunity to weigh in on that. You'll have the opportunity to weigh in on the programs, and you'll have an opportunity later to weigh in on the budget assumptions that go into developing the budget. So we're looking for a more inclusive process, and I think the one thing that you'll learn is that not all dollars are the same. Various programs have various different funding sources outside of the tax levy. For instance, I think social services is at 34% of their program is levy. The rest comes from grants. So when you make a dollar cut, across the board cut, it impacts every department differently. With that, I'll turn it over to Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. And excuse me, just to build on the comments that Supervisor Robinson made, I think it's a very worthwhile exercise to go through the
the pointed three questions that Chair Robinson referenced, starting with what programs or services do we deliver? Again, that is a policy question. If you think back to our orientation and budget kickoff, that was one of the slides that had the three policy questions. Of course, there's a limitation on that. You are, as we've frequently talked about, an arm of the state. Counties are an arm of the state. They utilize you, as you do an arm, to carry out your will. So the state is asking you, in fact, they're telling you, these are the things we want you to do. Those are your mandated and discretionary programs. And we put together that document working with department heads. To Chair Robinson's point, it's to help inform you of some of those programs and the mandates that exist. I'll make a couple of general comments. First, it is, as you'll see in that document, fairly common for the state to say, we want you to deliver service X. So they will mandate various services, and you'll see that the program name, and then the mandate middle column, and then we try to include statutes as appropriate. It's less common for them to provide very specific direction as to the level of that mandate. So, for example, with respect to roadway work, there is a mandate that counties provide a county highway system, but there is not within the statutes or the administrative code a great deal of direction as to what your PACER rating must be and how many miles of roadway is right for your community. So level of service, that second question, is a very important place to also get involved. So again, that first question, what programs or services are delivered? The second question, at what level of service? And some takeaways, I think this is now committee number 4 that we've been to, some takeaways from those previous committees about, what's helpful to kind of elaborate on what does level of service look like. Couple of those takeaways. Level of service can be time. So if you think about down in conservation planning and zoning, if someone applies for a permit, level of service might dictate how quickly we're able to turn around those permit applications when we receive them. How quickly can we review them and get the answer back to the landowner? Another good proxy for, or measure of quality rather, would be or level of service would be quality. I referenced roadways before. You have a PACER rating, a pavement rating that our highway staff go out every year to do PACER ratings for roadway sections, evaluating the pavement. The county board has set a policy target of an average PACER rating across our system of 7. That is a quality measure that is to inform staff relative to our delivery of service. It's a level of service. And then the last one, and Chair Robinson referenced this already, can be target population. We have a number of programs that, that aren't available to everyone. They're targeted programs. We have programs within conservation planning and zoning that are not mandated, but they make various grant programs available to farmers that are otherwise subject to DNR regulation. Just an example. Target, it's a program to address the needs and challenges of a target population. And then that third question is at what cost? And the documents that we've provided to help you in that discussion are the two that Chair Robinson already referenced. That's the rate and fee schedule. We've compiled all of the information from across our various departments about the rates and fees they're charging for the various services that they deliver, and some of those are constrained by statute. For example, within the Register of Deeds office, some of their fees that they charge are set by state statute. Other areas we have latitude with respect to fees. And then the last document that Chair Robinson referenced to help you in that conversation over time is that 5-year budget summary document by department. And as Chair Robinson referenced, it's helpful, I think it's helpful to see the levy breakdown. So if you think about the 2 columns on the far right of that document, we have percentage of departmental budget that is constituted by levy. And that varies widely by department. To Chair Robinson's point, not every dollar in the budget is created equal. So you'll have departments like administration and the sheriff's office that are largely funded by levy. And then you have departments like Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, Conservation, Planning, and Zoning, and Social Services, where levy constitutes a far smaller portion of that overall budget. Again, however, one caveat to that, not every program within every department shares that same percentage. So for example, within social services, we have programs that, we have a community response program that's aimed at keeping cases out of the child protection system, working with families so that we don't have to institute formal legal process. That's 100% tax levy funded. We have other programs at social services that are 100% funded by sources other than levy. Comprehensive community service, children's long-term support. So while the percentages I think are helpful, they are not accurate across every department, every program within the department. So those are a couple of pieces just to elaborate on what Chair Robinson referenced. Some other takeaways that we heard in the other three committees, were when we get to the portion of the discussion about fees, and we recognize you're not likely to get into detail on everything today, but fees that we're going to be asking department heads to be able to speak to at your next meetings. I'm going to have department head meeting coming up next week, and we're going to talk about this idea of fee philosophy. What is the guiding philosophy behind our fees? So for example, at Parks, Rec, and Forestry, what is the desire, what is the target to accomplish with respect to the fees that we're charging? So for example, do we charge the full cost of the service we are delivering? Or do we charge as our target something less? Is it 75% cost recovery because the county board or a standing committee that you've delegated this authority to has made a determination that there's a public good component to a particular service that justifies not charging the full cost to the individual procuring the service? So that's one takeaway, this idea of fee philosophy. Another takeaway, and this is something I think we brought up in first with Health and Human Services, was this idea that we want to make sure that you have the opportunity and give some thought to and prioritize your time talking about what programs or services do you want us to deliver. That should really be the first item of discussion, and one that's a practical consideration, because that is, in terms of building the budget, that direction from the county board is going to be most helpful to me and department heads when we go through and build our budget. If there's a program that, looking through this list or having conversations at these committee meetings, that is not mandated, that you see as something, we don't need to be in this business for X, Y, Z reason, we'd like that feedback earlier rather than later, because then we can start to, through conversations with the appropriate standing committee and the full board, figure out what the next step is, reallocating those existing resources to some other programs. And then, very importantly, we want you to understand you do have the opportunity, and please reach out to staff if you want us to assist you in identifying new program areas. I'll give you an example. Each of you I know received the Wisconsin Counties Association and the National Association of County Communications a number of years ago, when this committee was chaired by Vice Board Chair McEwen, and Health and Human Services was chaired by now Public Safety Committee Chair Boots. They held a joint meeting following a National Association of Counties conference about this idea of starting a transitional housing program for individuals that would be discharged from the county jail, based on a presentation at the National Association of Counties, and also an understanding that people cycling through the Marathon County Jail contributed to significant cost increases. So we never moved forward with that. It wasn't deemed a priority to start that program. But if you do have an area that you want staff to assist you in gathering information to develop a new program, by all means, please let us know that. So that was a long explanation of kind of the thought process that we've heard from the other committees to this point. We have a number of department heads here that if you do have questions in looking through the mandated program list, questions about a particular program, you want to learn more, they're here hopefully today to be able to get you that information. But if not today, we might need to look into that information. We can bring it back for your next meeting. But that idea, that conversation around what programs and services are we going to deliver, that is, in my mind, as your administrator, a more pressing need for that direction earlier in the budget process. The fees, level of service, we can talk about those things later, kind of actually in the order that they were posed to you. Most pressing is what programs or services do we deliver. Second would be level of service, and then fees we can identify later in the budget building process. But it's really that first question is the operative one. What programs or services? The final takeaway I'll say is there was conversation about, well, what about tax levy? When do we have that conversation? And I think that over those conversations with the committees, this is my characterization, and this is the explanation I provided. Your operating levy is essentially going to be what it is going to be. We talked about this at your budget orientation and kickoff. It's set by state law and administrative code. Your operating levy is going to increase by a measure of net new construction and any new TID closures. The way to affect the tax rate will come. The county board most certainly will have the opportunity to weigh in on that. Chair Robinson referenced a couple of important pieces that are going to be through HR, finance, and property, and then considered by the full board. Your capital improvement program is one. Borrowing is another. But your operating levy is largely going to be what it's going to be. So I understand certainly the need to have that conversation or want to have that conversation, but I think starting with the programs, as suggested by Chair Robinson, is a very prudent approach.
Just a quick closing comment. This committee has done a lot relative to systems budgeting with the understanding that what happens in one department is not unique to that department and has an impact on the systems. And if you look at the relationship of law enforcement, the district attorney's office, the clerk of courts, and others, they have a significant impact on each other. And we would ask that committees, when they're looking at their recommendations, look at it at that system-wide approach. And just to put things in perspective, the clerk of courts has a $3.8 million approximately budget. 44% of that comes off of levy, sales tax, and others. The sheriff's department is a $16.7 million budget. 91% comes off the levy. The corrections is 9.8, almost 9.9 million, 8.1. Or 82% comes off the levy. DA's office has 1.5 million, 73% of that comes off the levy, and emergency management is 329,000, 48% of that comes off the levy. So, not all dollars are the same. Not all dollars come from the same source. When you cut levy, it has a disproportionate impact, but there's also that system-wide impact, and keep those things in mind. And I apologize, I'll be here for a few more minutes, but I've got to run to another meeting at 2.
So I'll start off by saying thank you to those guys for giving us that information. I'll have a few comments, and then I'll open up the floor to questions for Supervisor Robinson and Administrator Leonard. This is kind of going back in time to the priority-based budgeting. We've done these types of things 8 to 10 years ago. And I guess I want to just make the comment. I appreciate the document. It was a great document to see what's mandated, but there's more to it than just what's mandated. And I feel that sometimes at the board level, we always say, well, what's mandated, that's all we should really be doing. And that's not really the case in my mind. The things I think I look at, for the most part, and I just put down my thoughts, were mandated, obviously, first thing we look at, but then we look at contracted services to meet something that's mandated. We look at contracted services where there's matching funds from either the state, private agencies, or the federal government. Does it save the county money by having the program? Our diversion programs are a great thing to look at that, I guess. When we do a diversion program, it saves the county money by not putting people in jail. Building another jail, they're not cheap anymore if you haven't looked at the numbers. Does it save the money? Does it help us reach our mission statement? That's something we need to not lose focus on too. If it's not mandated in things like the women's community, things like that, we need to look at those things also. But I just want to make those couple comments. When you look at budgeting, it's not as easy as is it mandated or not mandated. There's several things that we need to look at. So with that, I will open the floor to board members. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was going through the documents and I was wondering, Sheriff Billups, I don't know if you know this, what is the rate that inmates are able to pay the daily fee? How many of them actually? Yeah, how many of them actually pay it?
Not many, but we have a number of mechanisms in place to actually get them to come in and pay it, where we do collect those. So if an inmate comes back into our jail and they happen to have money on them, we will take a percentage of that and apply it towards their debt. We also do tax intercept so that we can go out and grab some of those funds in order to make sure that we're clearing up that debt. At the end of the day, there is a great deal of debt out there, and collecting those fees is very difficult with people that don't have jobs and have all the struggles that they have.
Okay, thank you. And what is the sheriff's shelter home?
We don't have one anymore. The shelter home is that site out there. We have secure detention yet. We still run that. But the shelter side of it, we stopped operating 8 months ago or so, 9 months ago.
And the one last one, the juvenile detention center, what capacity is that running at?
Today, I believe we had 9 out there. So it can go up to, trying to recall here, I think it's 15. I think we can have as many as 15 out there at one time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the supervisor? Go ahead.
I just had a small one under the finance. What is a cash reconciliation? What does that pertain to?
It's a finance function required by auditors to reconcile your expenditures and your revenues. So when we have it's really a function of duties between the treasurer's office and the finance department. Finance is charged with conducting the reconciliation. It's also generally speaking, it's a fraud protection. You're very fortunate to have a board chair who's skilled in accounting. He can explain it better than I can. It's a required function of government, if not by statute, required by our auditors.
Further questions? Go ahead.
I have one more. So when we had the set budget for the sheriff's department, were you under that this last year, or were we around par, or
Well, I'll tell you this. One of the beauties of county budgeting is that your revenues will equal your expenses, and any amount that you don't spend rolls over as per your policy that we've talked about. I can guarantee you they were not over budget because we can't go over budget. We have to come in and ask for an amendment. We would be asking a budget amendment, a transfer from contingency or reserves. The board has done that in the past. And I'll say this with respect to county budgeting. There's a reason the board has done that in the past. You have a number of areas where your expenses are going to be what they are. I'll give you 2 examples. You already hit one, the jail. The decision of whether or not an inmate remains in jail on a cash bond or whether they're serving a sentence in jail is not dictated by the amount of money you put into the sheriff's office budget. It is dictated by the processes of the legal system, and then as those processes play out, whether the individual can post bond or the length of their sentence that's imposed, those are going to be what they're going to be. Similarly, another area of significant expense in the past that did require a budget transfer, child protection cases. The decision of whether or not a child needs to be placed in a foster care placement for a child protection case or a youth justice case if it requires placement in Lincoln Hills. And a Lincoln Hills placement for a year is about $400,000. Those placement decisions are dictated by the needs of the child and the determinations of the judge. Our budgets are an estimate of past practice, based on past practice and past experience of what we anticipate our expenditures to be. We believe they're good estimates. That's why we bring them to you as a budget. But on occasion, things have required budget amendments. We had a budget amendment relative to each of those things, jail expenses and child protection expenses. I believe it was 2017, 2018, with the significant increase we saw in, maybe it was 2016, with opioids. So those things are, it's helpful to, it might be helpful or it might make logical sense to start your budget process by saying, oh, we're going to reduce this by this amount of money. But there are some things you just don't have that control over. If they spend, you can cut the sheriff's office overtime budget, but there are laws that require us to pay people when they work. And if we have to incur those costs for a various reason, we have to pay them. The district attorney's office, if they have a large trial, we have ratcheted down their budget with respect to significant outside expert fees. If they have a very serious event that requires significant outside experts to come in and you have to pay those individuals, they very likely could come in with a budget request for that. The clerk of court's office, similarly, if we have to sequester a jury for a prolonged period of time, we don't build those anomalies into the budget, and we have a process by which then we account for them. So I know that was a bit long-winded, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone keeps that top of mind.
Because what I was thinking that, like, if the sheriff's department falls under budget, and I know you have a building that needs to be repaired, when it comes to CIP projects, if they fell well under budget, we should be able to take some of that money. It'd be voted on the board by the board, but take some of that money and say, well, we're under budget here. We could spend this money there, and just start looking at some things that way maybe. But I don't know if it'd work.
Well, that was actually a question that was posed during your budget orientation. If you recall, the question was, can we take from a budget? Yeah. It can be done, but that requires the board to act. I want to be very clear. Departments do not have the ability to move. If there's a shortage, we come under budget in terms of personnel based on vacancy within the sheriff's office, or our inmate budget is lower, our actual is lower than our budgeted. Chad does not have the ability to take those funds from the jail budget and transfer them to do a capital project. We could, and we have on occasion, when we have a capital project identified within a department, I challenge department heads to say, okay, you have this capital project you want to move forward. What funding do you have within your budget based on where you are in the year that you can utilize to offset those costs so that we don't have to dip into either contingency or reserves or some other funding mechanism? But they do not have the ability, absent board action, to do any of those things. But you're absolutely right. It makes logical sense to do that so that you protect contingency during the year. You don't want to spend most of your contingency, spend 80% of contingency halfway through the year. So we do challenge departments to do that, but just want to be very clear, they don't have the legal ability under your rules and under state statute to do that without board action.
Chairman Gibbs.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that leads to the exact reason why the policy is written the way the policy is written for our finance policies, and that is after, at the end of the year, or when we close out their budgets, if their expenses are under what they had budgeted for, there's an excess. That excess, by audit and by rule or by our policy, rolls over into the CIP fund. It doesn't it doesn't get used or isn't usable by that department or carry overable by that department into next year and say, well, I might use that again, I might need that next year. It rolls directly after the auditor's finished. They determine what is exactly accurate as far as how much was the sheriff's operating costs under budget, and that difference then rolls over automatically into the CIP and therefore reduces the cost when it comes to CIP projects, because we don't have to go out and finance for them in the short term or even in the long term. So great question, but it really lends itself to why the policies that have been developed
I
have been
understand
developed.
the policy. What you're talking about. What I wanted to bring up is what I meant to say is, you know, if they're under budget and budget's coming from their department, you know, because right now we have priorities that are separate from that, so that could be down at the bottom of the budget. But if they're serving under budget, maybe I guess it doesn't work that way. It would be if they're under budget, but their CIP project is down on the list. You know, it's.
I think there's a potential that you might incentivize the wrong behavior, and that would be that you potentially increase your budget, knowing that you're going to come in under budget, that you now can move a priority on your CIP list. And I think that's why the board specifically says, nope, we'll roll it into the CIP, and then we'll have our own processes that determines priorities for CIP projects. And everyone, as the county as a whole, will get looked at as far as where is the priority on the CIP projects, and not in particular one particular department.
So in my mind, you're thinking like it's a rewarding program. You've done your fiscal responsibility. You've kept us under budget. That money should be used. I get that side of it. Then the other side is that side of it. So, any other questions, or I guess the way it's agendized is recommendations by this committee for finance and Administrator Leonard. So, any further, I guess, questions or comments?
If I can just add one thing, Chair Boots, just so you have some additional context, there hasn't been any recommendations from any standing committees yet. The big final takeaway that everyone had was, wow, this is a lot of information. And as Chair Boots referenced, yes, this is something that was talked about with priority-based budgeting a number of years ago. This is my sense, and I could easily be disavowed of it, but my sense is we're not delivering anything. The county board hasn't selected any programs for county departments to deliver that aren't very important to the people of the county. I don't expect you to look through and say, hey, you know what, we can easily get rid of this and not impact anyone. That's, I guess, good news and bad news for you. But the next steps are, again, if you have questions about a program, because there's a lot of information in that document, and I've already caught a couple of areas where it was unclear, or actually it was a holdover from a previous document that we're actually no longer delivering that program. But please let us know, and staff can bring that to you. That's why department heads are all here. I've asked as many as can attend all these standing committee meetings, just as Supervisor Wilhelm, you referenced. If you have a question about a program, what is it? Feel free to ask. We can try to give you that information. And we can do that today, or if you have questions after today, reach out to me and I will put you in contact with if I can answer the question, I prefer to do that. Department heads are exceedingly busy delivering the services. I can just hopefully answer your questions at a high level, because that's probably all you need. So if there are questions right now you have, as was asked before by Supervisor Sandelsky and Supervisor Wilhelm about specific programs, please let us know. We can give you that. If there's other information you want, really, we deliver programs at the behest of the county board. So please let us know. Yeah.
What's WASA MPO?
Wausau Metropolitan Planning Organization. That's been the organization that you probably heard has been designated by the governor to be the metropolitan planning organization for the metro area. It's a mandated activity. We support it through our conservation planning and zoning department with staff, but it receives an offset of funding. So all of the major municipalities within the metro area have representatives, but it is limited to that defined area by the federal government. If you have any specific questions about it, Chair Robinson just left, but he actually chairs the MPO as well.
And like Administrator Leonard said, I mean, if we have any questions, feel free. I feel it now with him saying that. Emails are fine. Copy us in. We can actually have another agenda item if you want to talk about this further. This is our opening talk on the subject, but this gets the ball rolling, I guess, on everything that we've been putting together as far as Chair Gibbs and Administrator Leonard have been putting together for our budgeting. So just keep it going. Make sure that the committees are apprised of all the information.
And to the extent we can help you, as Chair Robinson referenced, one of the things I think everyone appreciates about the complexity of the county budget, as was alluded to before, if you change one program, and it sometimes changes you make the result will be affected somewhere else. So, for example, we've had this conversation about the justice system. You know, if we have a bottleneck in one area, it will cause issues or concerns. Or if we have a policy change in one area, it'll have impacts in other areas. To Chair Boots' comment about diversion programs, the district attorney's office diversion programs, and the discussions we have at the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, both those things you are not mandated to have diversion programs. You are not mandated to have a CJCC. The idea behind them is to address some of those challenges and some of those bottlenecks to the greatest extent you can keep the court process to people that the district attorney's office has said, you know what, these individuals need to go through the formal court process. I think all the taxpayers of Marathon County are well served. You know, if there's a less intrusive way to address those safety concerns, the professionals in the DA's office are well suited to make those determinations. Again, they're not mandated programs. So happy to have you help you kind of understand the thought process of what I understand the thought process to be of previous boards for approving those. If at any point you have those questions, just reach out.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Supervisor Lamont.
All right. Go ahead, Supervisor Lamont.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if it's appropriate at this time, but so I don't ask another dumb question at the county board meeting, how are we getting the jail meals paid right now, or made? Who's providing the jail meals?
Sheriff Bibble. Sheriff Bibble. I don't know. Sheriff Bibble.
Yes, those are being prepared by North Central Healthcare. Their kitchen is currently making those meals, and they're being brought over and served here. There are staff on hand here that help get them out, but that's what we're working on, and there's a whole other project taking place right now to move to a different model, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Right. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Chair Boots.
Hold on, one more before you, and then is that Supervisor Mask?
Morash.
Oh, Supervisor Morash. All right, you're after. What?
I have one more question. You were talking about benefits. What is the value of the benefit package for county employees for health insurance, vacation time? Because like where I work, they tell us what the values of our benefits are.
Sure. So there's a very good section in the budget book that talks about health insurance. I mean, that's probably the one we have the best. We don't have a great mechanism to report total compensation through our package. I think we're working to have our new ERP system, our new Workday system, do a better job of that. But you can find the difference between what is the overall cost of our healthcare plan for a family plan versus an individual plan within the budget book, and what the employee share of those benefits are. My general statement to you, and this is going to be one thing that HR Finance is actually looking to do in the budget process in terms of budget priorities and budget assumptions, any wage or compensation increase and relative changes to the health plan, those are going to be things that are going to be discussed at HR, Finance, and Property. So if you're interested in that, certainly attend those meetings. But the budget book is probably the best place for you to look for the cost of a health plan. I'll be close, but it's not going to be precise. Our single plan cost is just about $9,000. Family plan, I believe, is $25,000. So you can see this is, again, a reason why in the budget we don't give department heads the ability to move money around on the personnel side, because it is not within their scope of control whether or not an employee is taking the health plan at all, or whether they're going to take a family plan. That's an individual decision. We give them what their personnel budgets are going to be in light of their past experience, and the people who are currently holding each of the positions, they have control of their operations budget. But in terms of total compensation, it really depends on individual employee election. So I have a family health plan, so my total compensation and what benefit is conferred upon me is dramatically different than if someone is on the single health plan or they don't take our health plan. And we haven't historically offered incentives to individuals like some companies do to say, hey, if you don't take the health plan, we will give you a $2,500 stipend. We haven't done that.
Okay, where I work, when the healthcare package is passed by the government, if your benefits were valued at a certain point, you had to pay a fine for every dollar you were over that, and it's just something that we do need to just keep in mind.
My understanding is that was struck from the bill struck from the Affordable Care Act by court action, and we are not subject to any. I think that was called the Cadillac tax at the time it was referred to generally. But our benefits, if you have specific questions on any benefit, let me know. But the health insurance benefit within the budget book, it gives you actually, I want to say we go back 15 or 20 years on how that benefit has changed. Generally speaking, I would say our benefits are, that used to be a big recruiting point, a strength for local governments. I wouldn't say that's the case anymore. There are a lot of private businesses that have strong benefit packages. Ours is still competitive. I certainly wouldn't say it's a detriment for us, but the idea that our benefits are far and away superior to the private sector, I don't think that's the case any longer.
Supervisor Morash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment/question. So in terms of the first thing Administrator Leonard said was we were supposed to consider what programs we want to deliver and then identify new programs. So one program I believe is very beneficial, and I hope other people agree, is the CART program. And I think budgeting to expand that somehow would be beneficial for the county. I know the CJCC is working to formulate a plan for the use of the funds from the opioid settlement. So I'm wondering if there are any plans with that to expand CART.
Go ahead.
I'll just say that's been a discussion. We had our first facilitated event around through the CJC around what recommendations to bring to the board to do with those funds. And certainly the expansion of CART, I seem to recall that was brought up in that meeting. If not, I know it's been brought up in a lot of other contexts, and it's certainly on the radar. I think the question we need to look at and the board would need to weigh in on is not only what that program or that level of service needs to be increased, but a little bit more insight from the board on in what capacity. The CART program is, as Chair Robinson referenced, a partnership between law enforcement and crisis professionals at North Central. So our team currently is two teams, one Wausau Police Department officer with a crisis professional, one Sheriff's Office deputy with one crisis professional. If you think about it this way, that Marathon County, it's a direct service through North Central Healthcare for that to be provided to Marathon County. So Marathon County, through our budget, is responsible for 3/4 of that team. We're responsible for each of the 2 crisis professionals and the sheriff's office deputy, Wausau Police Department. The city of Wausau, of course, then is responsible for the cost of that additional officer. So understanding more of what the board's desire is in terms of what level of service would it be, we could look to expand that service, and I understand that, and Chad can probably speak to this more than I can, but I understand that conversations had historically happened with other metro law enforcement agencies to inquire whether or not they were interested in allocating law enforcement services to expanding CART. North Central Healthcare, as you all know, is, they have some significant budget challenges as well with their debt service obligations they have to Marathon County. So certainly more funds would need to be brought to the table, but I think to your specific question, Supervisor Marash, whether or not, or at least the undertone of your question, whether or not those opioid funds would be eligible, I think is largely going to be determined based on the way that team would be structured, because there are pretty, I don't want to say narrow, but there are certainly guardrails on what those funds can be used for. And the broad work that CART does, I think we might have some, we'll have to look into that a bit more to be able to give you a direct answer.
Would it be appropriate for us to put that as a item on our next meeting, as far as CART, what it all delivers, give some numbers and things like that would be something? All right, please put that down for our next meeting. Further questions? With that, I guess we'll move on, if there's nothing else. All right, thank you. Administrator Leonard, did you want to go through anything else on 5A 1 through 3?
I don't, it's a loaded question. Do I want to go through anything else?
The 5-year,
I'm happy to
I was looking
answer-
at the 5-year department expense levy document. Did you want to?
No, I don't think so. We've already referenced it enough. If you have questions about any of the significant swings you might see in that document, for example, if you look at emergency management, there have been some pretty significant changes in their allocation throughout that 5-year timeline. I can give you the insight on why that is if you have significant questions. Their budget, Phil's budget, is pretty small. So when we moved a large contractual expense from Phil's budget to the sheriff's office or vice versa, it would have a big swing. But the idea is the documents are to help you have a conversation. Reach out if you have any questions. I don't need to take any more of your time. I know you have a pretty significant item coming up with the resolution.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to 6A, resolution extending encumbrance of ARPA funds for Regional Forensic Science Center project, amending 2023 CIP budget, and authorizing expenditure for design services. With that, I'll just kind of kick it off with saying I have talked at length with Vice Chair McEwen, I've talked with Administrator Leonard, and I have talked with Chair Gibbs on this. I have, as Craig will probably throw my way, or Chris's way, I do have background in this area as far as construction management and things like that. So if there's any questions that you have on my end or Chris's end on that side of it, we'd be willing to help out with that for Craig's request. So with that, I'll turn it over to Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. Before I get started, I'm just going to ask if Jess Blahnik, our medical examiner, would care to come up here in case I forget something. Thank you. So, as far as the resolution, Jess and I are asking the Public Safety Committee to approve and support the resolution that's in your packet, which is on page 135. It's almost to the end of the packet. I believe the resolution is critical for the success of the Marathon County Regional Forensic Science Center. This resolution was approved last Friday by the MORT Task Force. The process is to move it forward to public safety, HR, finance, and property, and then to the full board. The resolution has three parts to it, and every one of them is very timely, time sensitive, and needs to be approved by public safety, HR, finance, which we'll be going to tomorrow, and then the full board on Thursday. The first part of the resolution is asking to extend the length of time to utilize the ARPA funds that were approved by the county board, the $2 million. The funds have to be utilized by July 31st, 2023, and we're asking to have that changed to December 31st, 2023. And the main reason for this is there's a tentative award for $10.6 million in the Wisconsin Joint Finance Committee, which we may not have an answer before July 31st. We're looking at possibly sometime in August for this budget. And I know Chairman Gibbs has been keeping track of this. He's much more familiar with the process as far as the state budget. And I don't know if Chairman Gibbs wants to add anything, but that was just a quick overview.
Sure. Thank you. So where you're at right now from the standpoint of the state, obviously the board is well aware that the county has put a request in to the state of Wisconsin to assist in funding the cost of construction of the Forensic Science Center. The request was for $10.6 million, and the county has offered to put in $2 million from ARPA. Now, what has taken place is at this point there is a standalone piece of legislation that's been offered by Senator Filikowski and also representatives from the Assembly to do just that, provide the $10.6 million of dollars in a standalone piece of legislation. Now, the standalone piece of legislation isn't the authorizing document. I should say it is the authorizing document. However, it is not the funding document. So again, you got separate legislation that's being offered to create the authorization for $10.6 million to fund the construction of the Forensic Science Center. And then you have the budget. And the budget will be the funding mechanism if that legislation is passed. And so then there's also been a request that has been forwarded to Senator Baldwin's office for congressionally directed spending. There's been discussions that she's willing to move forward, at least on her request side, an additional amount of funding for the Forensic Science Center. So that's where we sit right now. The WCA has worked diligently in getting that legislation moved forward, and looks like it will be taken up, and we will have some kind of result on that standalone piece of legislation, and then the next action would be the budget itself, funding it.
Thank you. And as far as the time frame for the federal $2 million to whatever it might be, that may be later this summer also. So we may not have any information on that by that July 31st deadline. So this is the main reason we're asking for that part of the resolution to be extended to December 31st of 2023. The second request is to amend the 2023 Capital Improvement Program budget. As this project has been studied since 2017, It's not yet in the capital improvement budget for 2023, so we're asking to have that included in the 2023 CIP budget. And then the third part of it is requesting to authorize $178,095 of the $2 million ARPA funds to procure design services. And the design service phase of this is estimated to take 5 to 6 months before that would be done. And the longer this program is out there and not the program okayed, it's going to cost more. And I'm not sure, but when we first started studying this back in 2017, there was estimated cost of 6 to 7 million, and things have progressed, for over 5 years. And as Chair Booth said, he understands the budgeting process as far as construction. And what we're trying to do is get an RFP out there before by January of 2024, because I'm not sure, but I was told that that's when a lot of the different organizations start bidding on these projects.
And I'm sure that both Administrator Leonard and Assistant Administrator Chris is apprised of all this information also. But typically, you try to get your bids out, and this would put it at November or December if Vice Chair McEwen is correct for the bidding process. And what contractors typically do is bid for their work for the next year, November, December. Now, there's another issue where sometimes if you don't bid it in January, February, sometimes you can either get crazy high or crazy low cost, depending on if they need work or don't need work, and what the economy's like at the time. So, Vice Chair McEwen is correct. If we do indeed want to go forward, that this is the time to do it on the front end here and not be the last one at the plate. There's a cost associated to it. Obviously, the $178,095. I can tell you that the projects that I've seen so far, the last probably year and a half, 2 years, have gone higher as the years have gone on, or as the year has gone on. So the faster we do this, the better. It isn't going down anytime soon. I don't see commodities are still crazy. So, with that, I guess questions that you had for Vice Chair McEwen, or go ahead.
Thank you.
I just got one. I'm looking at the numbers here. It's 14.8 million, and then the state, if we get that grant from the state, 10.6, and then 2. So we'd still be short 2.2 million. Is that correct, or?
That's where we're relying on the congressional $2 million from the federal government.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
to clarify, it's $2 billion from ARPA funds from us, $2 million from the feds, and then $10 million from the state.
Okay.
It makes the
okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Just 1 second.
And I just wanted to say that we do have a 20% contingency for the construction costs in there. So our estimates are on the very absolute high end. So that cost will come down after the design is finalized, or we would have a better idea exactly how much we need and where we would be in that scale.
Go ahead, Jason.
Are there strings attached to the state money or federal money that we would be getting?
There are no strings attached to anything besides we're going to be running the Marathon County Forensic Science Center. That's there. I haven't seen any, and I don't know what type of strings they could be attached to that. But no, at this point, I know of none.
Chair Gibbs.
Yeah, I think it is anticipated that the requirement be that we continue to operate a forensic science center. The business plan that's been developed has insight into additional partnering with Medical College of Wisconsin along with the tech, but also providing potential forensic pathology services to counties, neighboring counties, and counties to the north of us. At this current time, it's anticipated that significant number of the counties, and our business plan is predicated on a significant number of the counties that are to the north of us that currently have very limited access, meaning they have to go to either Madison, Milwaukee, or potentially Dane County is the only options that they have. And now they would have, if this does get built and becomes operational, they'll have another avenue to provide us to provide those services for them.
Administrator Leonard.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's hard to say. I can't say, and I don't think any of us can say. There's, we don't know what the strings are going to be. I think we can reasonably confidently say we don't anticipate strings that are outside of what we're asking for the money for. Just for context, we got a similar grant from the state of Wisconsin last year, or 2 years ago, relative to some of our work at the North Central Healthcare Campus. The project, as you know, called for a significant expansion of inpatient mental health services, the hospital. And the state of Wisconsin Building Commission, we received a $5 million grant for that. In exchange for those funds, we agreed through receiving them that we would operate the services as we said. So as Chair McEwen referenced, I don't think we anticipate any strings outside of doing what we're asking the money to do. And Jess can talk a lot more about the business plan. That's a significant part of this that, as Task Force Chair McEwen referenced, has been ongoing for just about 5 years now. And one other thing, just to highlight that the state is considering in that standalone bill, credit to the task force and to Jess for bringing this up. They drafted a modification to existing state law to allow us to implement the death record signing fee that is otherwise prohibited by Chapter 59 of the statutes that Jess talked to you about over the last couple of meetings. They are going to give us a period of time that if we do make this conversion to professional pathology services, where we would have the ability to implement that fee for service, which, as if you have any questions about it, Jess can elaborate, positively impacts our cash flow analysis throughout our business plan, about $50,000 annually. So a nice improvement to our overall operations. And I just want to make clear our goal when this started, and it certainly predates me as your administrator, but the goal when this started, this is not going to be a money-making endeavor where the county contributes to the general fund. It's not an enterprise fund in that traditional sense, but the goal has been is to be cash flow neutral, and to the extent possible, maybe reduce a little bit of the levy that currently goes into that program. And the business plan, as you've all looked at, I think is positive. It's addressing a true operational need, not only in Marathon County that Jess can talk about from her office's perspective, but also law enforcement, the district attorney's office, I think, will be benefited. Technical college, as Chair Gibbs referenced, Medical College of Wisconsin, a lot of good would come from this. But it also, from a fiscal perspective, I think has the opportunity to be a significant positive as well.
Are there questions?
Chair Boots?
Yeah.
Chair Boots?
Yeah. Jean, go ahead, Jean.
I just wanted to say I'm in total support of this resolution moving forward because Marathon County has always been very forward thinking, and I think this is just another good example of that. I've been following this task force since its beginning and congratulate everyone for a job well done. There's been a lot of time spent researching all the options for this forensic center, and I thank everyone, and Jessica and the task force for their hard work. The plans, they did a thorough job in researching and vetting and planning the plans, potential partnership size. Everything has been researched, and I saw it change so many times over the years, so this has been picked apart and put back together many times. And just like when Marathon County invested the $1 million in the NTC teaching farm, showing support brings the money in. And the farm plan was not moving forward until the county invested, and then the donations and foundation help started coming in. And the program has been very successful ever since. And I do believe this is a very much needed facility that will help expedite our services needed here, save money for the county and law enforcement, and save money for the participating counties too, who have been enduring the same expensive difficulties that we've experienced. It is just a wonderful facility, and I cannot wait to see it come to fruition. I'm in total support of this.
All right, with that being said, I would like to just say one quick thing. So we're the standing committee of jurisdiction for this. So I just want to make it very clear, because I don't want to repeat what we had at the county board meeting a month ago. If we approve this, we're approving this as a committee, and we're saying we support this. And what we're really supporting in my mind, and maybe I'm breaking this down too much, but we're supporting spending $178,000 basically to get this drawn up on the hopes we're getting money from the state and feds. If they do not follow through, then we would not, and that $178,000 we would be out of. We would still have the plans and things like that. But just to make everyone aware, that's what we're doing. This has been in play for, like I said, 5 years. I commend them for doing this. I commend that originally the Marathon County was going to take on most of this, and then we said, no, let's see what the other people around us can do. And I commend them that we're at $2 million of ARPA funds, and the rest coming from somewhere else. But do understand that $178,000 is just for the design to bring a plan and spec that bidders can bid on in November, December, hopefully. Now, I don't know how far out, Chris, do you know how far out we're out, like as far as architects and engineers? Have you seen something where, are they pretty up to, I don't know where the architects are right now. I know who the two I work with, but.
Sure, yeah. So to answer your question, we had the pre-proposal workshop for the RFP this week, and we had 4 show up.
Okay.
And 3 of the 4 we know have morgue experience, so that's a good sign. And it wasn't mandatory, so there might be somebody else out there who'd respond. So that process is concurrent and underway.
Okay, perfect. All right, with that, I'll open up to the floor.
Thank you. I don't know if Jess has anything to add.
I could talk about this for hours. I've been working on it way before 2017. So if anyone has questions about it or anything else, we do have a very detailed presentation prepared for county board that we'd be happy to talk about any aspects of the operations, the business plan, how we came up with the figures, where the figures, how we got the information. I mean, I can go into as much detail as you guys want, and I could keep you here till after midnight if you would like as well. So I will not do that. I'll let you let me know what you want to know more about.
Chair Boots, Supervisor Morash.
Supervisor Morash, go ahead.
I think this is something that we need to move forward with, so I would like to make a motion to approve this resolution and move it to the full board.
I'll second that.
Come on, second.
Morash with the motion and second by Mask. And then further discussion, so go ahead.
I just had do they have a location already, or?
Yep, so we would be at the NTC campus. They have 2.5 acres of land that they're willing to sell to us for fair market value.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Or go ahead, Craig. No, there was somebody who was trying to make a motion. That was Bruce, Supervisor Lamont.
Thank you. On behalf of the Morgue Task Force, I just want to thank Public Safety Committee. They've been very supportive, very patient with this project. In fact, I do want to thank this committee for putting this in our strategic plan, which I hope in 2024 this committee can mark it as complete. But like I said, it's been well studied. We're to the point where this, I believe, is going to happen. I think we have a lot of support from state legislatures and from the federal government. And like I said, it's a win-win for Marathon County. It is called Marathon County Regional Task Force because we know the counties north of us and even some of them south of us are going to utilize this morgue. It's going to be, as Supervisor Mask said, that it's going to benefit law enforcement, it's going to benefit the medical college, it's going to benefit the criminal justice program at North Central Tech, the nursing program, and like Jess said, she could go on with 100 different things that are going to be beneficial to this community if this morgue is made possible. And like I said, it needs to be done now because like I said, the cost is going to continue to go up. So.
The other thing that's really important to note too is that throughout the years, we've always had our eyes on some up and coming pathologists. There's 2 current pathologists who want to stay in Wisconsin. One wants to relocate to Wisconsin, who's from Wausau. And then the other one will be finishing up his fellowship and hasn't decided where to go. So, I mean, if we do not have everything ready by next year where we're able to start looking into hiring a pathologist, we could potentially lose both of those great applicants who are from Wisconsin and want to stay in Wisconsin, which is huge. So there's also obviously other people opening up applications. We don't know what we would get, but we do have someone, and someone actually reached out to me over the weekend that was expressing a lot of interest to relocate here, who is from Wausau. So it would be someone who'd stay with us long term as well. That comes with a wonderful reputation and good experience. So that's the other big thing is if we don't have everything and have to bump it to start construction in 2025, we would lose both of those applicants.
Thank you. So are there any other questions? I know we have a motion and a second, and I don't have anything else to add. I don't know if Administrator Leonard does, or Chris or Jess do.
I'd like to say thank you guys. I mean, I know you guys have been in this a long time. I've been hearing about it for 5 years, so thanks you for all your time. And yeah, anything further on the motion? If not, all right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, guys. Moving on, we'll go to 7, educational presentations, committee discussion, none. 8, next meeting date and time announcement and future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. Anybody have anything they'd like to see on the next agenda, please either say something now or email either I or Administrator Leonard. Anything by the body? All right, well then 8B, next meeting Tuesday, June 6, 2023 at 1:30. And with that, I'll take number 9.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion
Second.
to adjourn by Supervisor Marash, second by Mask. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, everyone.